It had been months since the house last echoed with laughter. Evelyn Carter sat by the window, watching the pale morning light pour across the living room. The air smelled of coffee and sea salt, the familiar scent of the small coastal town she had lived in for most of her life. Since her daughter, Sophie, had gone abroad for university, the days had blurred together, each one quiet and predictable. She filled her hours with books, gardening, and long walks along the empty shore, but something inside her always felt unfinished, as if a part of her life had quietly drifted away with the tide. That morning, her phone rang. It was Sophie, her bright voice echoing through the speaker, full of energy and warmth. They talked about classes, friends, and small things, until Sophie mentioned something unexpected. One of her close friends, Liam Walker, had been planning a photography trip along the coast near Evelyn's town. He needed a place to stay for a couple of days, and Sophie wondered if her mother wouldn't mind helping him out. Evelyn hesitated for a moment, but agreed. She trusted Sophie's friends, and something in her voice, a spark of excitement, perhaps, made Evelyn feel a little less alone. Later that afternoon, a car pulled into the driveway. When the doorbell rang, Evelyn opened the door to find a tall young man with a kind smile and a camera hanging around his neck. Liam greeted her politely, his tone calm and respectful. He thanked her for letting him stay and explained his photography project, a collection of images capturing stillness in nature. He seemed quiet but observant, the kind of person who noticed the smallest details others often missed. As they sat down for tea, conversation came easily. Liam talked about the places he had visited, the stories behind his photographs, and his dreams of holding an exhibition someday. Evelyn listened with genuine interest, occasionally smiling at his enthusiasm. She hadn't felt this comfortable in a conversation for a long time. Most people spoke to her with pity or polite distance, but Liam spoke as if she were simply another person in his story, not just someone's mother or a woman living in memories. That evening, they planned to drive along the seaside road to a nearby cove that Liam wanted to photograph. The sun was already dipping low, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold. The road curved beside the ocean, the rhythmic sound of waves following them as they went. Evelyn found herself glancing at Liam now and then, admiring his quiet focus as he held his camera out of the window, chasing the perfect shot of the fading light. When they reached the small cove, the air had turned cool. The sea stretched endlessly ahead, and the wind carried the scent of salt and faraway rain. Liam set up his tripod near the rocks, while Evelyn stood watching the water shimmer under the dying sun. She had always loved this place, but standing there with someone else made it feel different, almost alive again. She felt the breeze against her face, soft and cold, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't mind the silence. Later, as they drove back to the guesthouse, the conversation turned more personal. Liam spoke about his parents' divorce and how he often felt lost between two homes. Evelyn listened quietly, her heart softening at his honesty. She shared a little about her late husband, not in sorrow, but in remembrance. They spoke as if the road itself had loosened something between them, allowing two strangers to meet somewhere in the middle of their unspoken griefs. The inn they stayed at was small but cozy, its wooden walls filled with the scent of old books and the sea. Evelyn took the room near the front window, where she could hear the waves through the night. Before sleeping, she opened her diary and began to write, something she hadn't done in months. Her handwriting was slower than she remembered, but the words came naturally. "It feels strange," she wrote, "how someone new can make the world seem familiar again." She paused, then smiled faintly before closing the book. The next morning was wrapped in mist. Evelyn woke early and found Liam already outside, crouched near the shore with his camera aimed at the horizon. The sea looked endless and white, as if the world had dissolved into fog. She walked over quietly, her footsteps soft against the sand. Liam turned and greeted her with a warm grin, offering her a cup of coffee from a small flask he carried. They stood together, watching the waves rise and fall, the moment unhurried and still. As they walked back, Evelyn found herself laughing, a small, genuine laugh that surprised even her. It wasn't because of anything funny, it was just the lightness of being in the moment. Liam looked at her, smiling too, but said nothing. Sometimes silence said more than words ever could. Throughout the day, they explored nearby cliffs and old fishing docks, capturing the raw beauty of the coast. Liam often asked for her thoughts on his photos, and she found herself giving advice, remembering the artistic eye she once had before life became too busy with responsibility. It felt good, to be seen, to be part of something again, even if it was just for a little while. By evening, the two of them sat by the beach, watching the sunset melt into the horizon. The sound of waves was soothing, and the fading light reflected on their faces like gold dust. Evelyn spoke softly, almost to herself, saying how she used to come here with Sophie when she was younger. Liam listened, nodding, his expression thoughtful. There was no awkwardness, no need for words, just the quiet companionship of two souls who understood the weight of silence. When they returned to the inn, the night air was cool and gentle. Evelyn stood by the window once more, looking at the dark sea stretching endlessly beneath the stars. She could hear faint music from a nearby cafe, the tune soft and distant. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the ache of loneliness pressing on her chest. There was peace, a small, fragile peace, but real. She whispered goodnight to herself and smiled, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. The next morning, Ethan woke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the curtains. He stretched and yawned, feeling both rested and slightly anxious about what the day might bring. Vanessa had already started preparing breakfast when he stepped into the kitchen. The smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee filled the room, making the space feel even warmer and more inviting. "Good morning, Ethan," Vanessa said with a smile, her voice calm and comforting. "Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," he replied, returning her smile, a little shyly. He noticed the gentle way she moved around the kitchen, the ease with which she handled the pans and dishes, and couldn't help but admire her grace. Vanessa caught his gaze and looked away quickly, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, as though she, too, felt the subtle electricity that lingered between them. Breakfast was a quiet, comfortable affair. They shared stories of their childhoods, their hobbies, and their dreams. Ethan laughed more freely than he had the day before, encouraged by Vanessa's easy warmth. Vanessa, in turn, found herself fascinated by his curiosity, the way he noticed small details, and the earnest way he asked questions. Each passing moment seemed to draw them closer, their conversations weaving a delicate thread of connection. After breakfast, Vanessa suggested showing Ethan the town. "There are a few places you might like to see," she said. "The park, the library, and the little market down the street." Ethan agreed eagerly, and they set out together. The walk was leisurely, giving them the chance to talk and share quiet smiles. Sometimes their hands brushed against each other by accident, sending small shocks of awareness through them both. Each touch lingered just a moment too long, yet neither said anything. At the park, Ethan watched Vanessa interact with people they passed, neighbors, shopkeepers, and even a few children. Her kindness and confidence impressed him, and he felt a mixture of admiration and a strange, unfamiliar longing. Vanessa noticed his gaze and felt her own pulse quicken slightly, aware of the subtle attraction growing between them. She told herself it was nothing, just the natural warmth of companionship, yet she couldn't ignore the way her thoughts lingered on him after each shared smile or word. In the late afternoon, rain began to fall softly, sending them both running for shelter under the awning of a small cafe. Inside, they ordered hot drinks and found a quiet corner, the cozy atmosphere amplifying the closeness they already felt. The sound of rain tapping against the windows created a rhythmic backdrop, almost like a heartbeat that matched the tension in the room. They sat side by side, their knees occasionally brushing, a warmth spreading through them that neither fully understood. Vanessa suggested they play a board game she kept on a nearby shelf, just to pass the time. Ethan agreed, and as they played, their laughter filled the room. Occasionally, Vanessa would reach across the board to move a piece, their hands briefly touching. Each touch sent a small jolt of awareness through both of them, and the room seemed charged with a quiet energy. Ethan's eyes met hers, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. He wanted to say something, anything, to acknowledge the feeling, but words failed him. Vanessa felt the same hesitation, caught between restraint and desire. As the rain slowed, they returned home, dripping slightly from the remaining drops. Vanessa suggested drying off with warm towels, and the simple act of helping each other brought a new closeness. Ethan's hand brushed Vanessa's as she handed him a towel, and they both lingered just a second too long, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The small gestures, the shared smiles, and the easy comfort of one another's presence had woven a tension that neither could deny. Evening came, and they found themselves in the living room once more, sitting near the fireplace. The flames flickered, casting shadows on the walls, and the warmth of the fire seemed to echo the warmth growing between them. Vanessa offered Ethan a blanket, draping it over his shoulders, and their fingers brushed as she adjusted it. Both of them felt the jolt of electricity, a mix of curiosity and desire that neither wanted to name out loud. Vanessa suggested a quiet moment, just sitting together, listening to music, letting the day's conversation settle. Ethan leaned back, feeling the comfort of her presence, and Vanessa felt a protective warmth toward him that was complicated by a new, unexpected attraction. They sat in silence, yet it was a silence filled with unspoken words, glances, and gentle movements that deepened the emotional intimacy. As the night deepened, Vanessa showed Ethan to his room again. He paused at the doorway, looking back at her with a mixture of admiration and something unspoken. "Good night, Vanessa," he said softly. "Good night, Ethan," she replied, her voice carrying the faint tremor of emotions she tried to hide. Alone, both of them reflected on the day, the laughter, the closeness, and the subtle touches that lingered in their memories. The attraction was undeniable, yet wrapped in the comfort of trust and care, creating a tension that neither wanted to confront too soon. The room was quiet, but both hearts were full of thoughts and feelings that promised a night of emotional awakening yet to come. The morning came quietly. The light outside the window was soft and pale, brushing against Evelyn's face as she opened her eyes. The sound of waves reached her before she fully woke, the same rhythm she had fallen asleep to, steady and eternal. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the photograph on the bedside table and remembered everything. The trip, the laughter, the calm evenings, and the way silence had felt comforting instead of lonely. She got up and opened the window. The air smelled of salt and wildflowers carried from the cliffs. Down below, Liam was packing his things into his car, carefully placing his camera bag on the back seat. The sight made her chest tighten slightly, though she wasn't sure why. 2 days had passed like a small dream, simple, quiet, and yet filled with something she hadn't felt in years. Evelyn went downstairs. Liam looked up as she stepped outside, his expression calm but thoughtful. "Good morning," he said softly. "I didn't want to wake you. I have to leave before the tide gets too high." She nodded. "It's all right. I'm glad I woke up in time to say goodbye." There was a pause, the kind that carries everything words can't say. The breeze moved through her hair, and the sea shimmered in the distance. Evelyn tried to think of something meaningful to tell him, something to match the quiet kindness he had brought into her days. But all she managed was, "Thank you, for reminding me that the world still has beauty in it." Liam smiled, the same calm, genuine smile that had first made her feel at ease. "You reminded me too," he said. "You just don't know it." He reached out, shaking her hand gently, holding it for a moment longer than politeness required. Then he stepped back, gave a small nod, and turned toward the car. The sound of the engine faded down the narrow road, until there was nothing but the call of distant seagulls and the whisper of the wind. Evelyn stood there for a long time, watching the road disappear into the hills. The stillness felt heavier than before, but not empty. She went back inside the inn, collected her things, and checked out. The owner waved her off kindly, wishing her a safe journey home. As she drove back along the coastal road, the same one they had taken together, everything looked a little different. The cliffs seemed higher, the water bluer, the world somehow brighter. She stopped once near the lookout point, where the ocean stretched endlessly to the horizon. For a few minutes, she just stood there, letting the wind tangle through her hair, the sun warming her face. It was strange how something as simple as the sea could make a person feel both small and infinite at the same time. By the time she reached her town, the afternoon light had softened. She parked the car near her home and carried her bags inside. The house felt quiet as always, but the silence no longer pressed down on her. She made tea, set the cup on the windowsill, and took out the photograph Liam had given her. The image seemed even more beautiful now, the golden reflection on the water, her figure caught between shadow and light. She placed it in a frame and set it on her living room shelf. Later that evening, her phone rang. It was Sophie. Evelyn's face lit up instantly. They talked about classes, travel plans, and small bits of life that filled the distance between them. Then Sophie mentioned, almost casually, that Liam had called her after the trip. "He said you were wonderful company," Sophie said, laughing. "He told me you made him feel at home." Evelyn smiled faintly, her heart warming. "He's a good young man," she said. "Very thoughtful." After they hung up, she sat by the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. The world outside was quiet, but her heart was calm. She thought about how easy it was to forget ourselves while caring for others, how years could pass in the shadow of what once was. Maybe this journey had not been about company or conversation at all. Maybe it had been about remembering herself. That night, she opened her diary again, the same one she had written in during the first evening of the trip. Her pen moved slowly at first, then steadied. It's strange, the way certain people appear in our lives, like a tide that comes in gently, changes the shape of the shore, and leaves us different than before. Liam reminded me that peace isn't something we find in others. It's something we remember inside ourselves. She set the pen down and closed the book. The wind outside carried the faint scent of the sea, even from this distance. She closed her eyes, letting the sound fill her mind, the whispering waves, the memory of laughter, the quiet companionship that had lasted just long enough to leave its mark. The days that followed fell into rhythm again, but the weight of loneliness no longer hung heavy. She began taking long walks by the water every morning, sometimes carrying her own camera. The world around her seemed sharper now, the patterns in the sand, the glimmer of shells, the way sunlight touched the waves. She felt present in a way she hadn't for years. Weeks later, a small envelope arrived in the mail. There was no letter inside, only a printed photograph, a view of the same sea from a higher angle, taken at sunrise. On the back, written in neat handwriting, were just 4 words: "Keep finding the light." Evelyn smiled as she read it. She placed that photograph beside the first one. Together, they looked like the beginning and end of a story, or perhaps the same moment seen from 2 hearts instead of one. That evening, as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, she walked to the shore once more. The sand was cool beneath her feet, and the waves lapped gently at her ankles. She stood there for a long while, watching the world grow quiet around her. The sea stretched out before her, endless and calm, reflecting the last glow of light. She whispered into the wind, though no one was there to hear, "Some journeys don't end when we return home." And with that, she turned away from the water, carrying the quiet peace of those 2 days within her, not as a memory of someone she met, but as a reminder of the version of herself she found again. The sea didn't take anything from her. It had given something back, something she had forgotten she still possessed, herself.